the most critical voices for the most part are internal. You know, we set high standards for ourselves. And so there's also fear of like, I don't want this to be judged. And I was telling my friend the other day of, this is the first time that I put something out that's so vulnerable that I can't take back, because I'm very present on social media and I've been doing this for a while. So there's a lot of my content. There's a lot of me out there. But even when it's something that's really raw and close to my heart, you can always delete it. But when it's out in the world, it's kind of that double-edged sword of you're going to have a lasting impact with what you do if you sell 100 books or 100 million books, and so it's the cool thing about it is that it really is an opportunity for you to witness yourself. And the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. And so if you're sitting there and you're like, how do I get started? Then maybe just look at like, are there a lot of ways in my life where I'm just kind of not doing something that I want to do? Because it might be something to look at. Because the thing is that when you get started, as we've been speaking to, it's going to be such an incredible growth process for you to witness yourself in the journey of it, and seeing it from beginning to end. And it's something crazy, like only 2% of all people that start a book actually publish it, and so it's like, it's pretty significantly small number. And so to really just honor the fact that, yeah, maybe you're going to publish it, but maybe it's just about you following through because you said you wanted to do this, and the block is usually internal. Maybe you don't have time, but maybe there's, you can just dedicate like 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a week, whatever it is having that commitment to yourself, because clearly there's something inside of you that's asking you to do this and calling you to do this. And so ask you, like, just see whatever you do to get quiet. Maybe it's yoga or gardening or whatever, and just go into that space where you feel connected, where you feel like, still.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have someone with me from a beautiful place on earth, somewhere I haven't been, my wife has been, and I would love to go someday. I want to say aloha to my guest today, Megan. Nolan's here with us today. We're going to be talking about her book and all of the great things she has going on in life and in her author journey. Megan, welcome to Living the Next Chapter.
Aloha. Thank you so much for having me. Lovely to be here.
It's great. It's great. Yes, let everybody know where you are in this big world of ours.
Well, in case you didn't guess, I am located on the beautiful island of Maui, Hawaii, out here in the middle of the ocean.
Amazing. And you have some connections back to Canada where I am, which makes me happy. But I'm living vicariously through you because, again, I haven't been to your part of the world. I would love to go there. And I actually just interviewed someone from Hawaii just recently, and they said the one thing they haven't really got used to is they would go down to the ocean and there'd be like sea turtles and stuff swimming around. Like, oh yeah, it's turtles. You're like, yeah, I would be extremely excited if I saw that anytime. So, pretty amazing to be in that part of the world. What do you love about where you are? I can see the breeze blowing in nicely beside you with the curtains moving. What do you love so much about where you are in this world?
Maui and Hawaii in general is a very magical place. It's very beautiful. It's very calming. Each of the islands has a unique energy to it. But Maui in particular is really special in that it really helps you to learn a lot. You get all these opportunities to learn and grow. And if it's a good fit for you to be here, it's life unfolds as it does and supports you. And if not, sometimes it kind of tosses you out a little bit. And I'm sure that can be said for many different places in the world. But I feel like just living out on the most isolated landmass on the planet and living on a volcano, which, sounds crazy to say, it's dormant, but still it's a volcano. It has its own charm to it, I guess. And so, yes, it's really beautiful to see all the different life forms that we have out here. Of course, living on a tropical island has its interesting things. I mean, this morning I was walking my doggy and there was a massive centipede. It was dead, thankfully, but that happens. But as you mentioned with your friend, you do see a lot of the sea turtles, and we get humpback whales that come out here in the wintertime. So that's really fun to be able to see them splashing and playing and do their fun thing out in the ocean. So yeah, lots of beautiful things.
It's going to kind of lead to our conversation as we talk about your book, but you seem like a very connected person to where you are in the world and your surroundings. What about being there when you got there as a new person to that part of the world? What was the one thing that you knew that this is where you needed to be?
That's such a great question because that's one of the things that I really knew because I had lived on the Big Island before, so a different island for 2 years and moved back to Canada, as you mentioned earlier. So I am originally from Canada. I'm from Ontario, from Ottawa, Canada. But after I graduated from school and I moved out here, I moved to the Big Island and I just didn't really feel right to me. There was a lot of tests, a lot of challenges. And so I moved back to Canada, but to British Columbia. And so, for 5 years was like, what have I done? I just, and it was so rainy and all of that. And it's beautiful on the West Coast, but it's so rainy. I just felt like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. And so then I moved to Maui because a friend of mine in the meantime had moved over here. And when I arrived on Maui for the first time to come for a vacation before I moved here, I remember getting off the plane and thinking, this feels like home to me. Home in the sense of that energetic space within yourself that you really feel like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be as a human. And beyond the safety of the four walls or however many walls of your actual physical home. But to me, it felt like this is where I'm supposed to be so that I can really thrive and go and live out my journey, at least this chapter of it. I don't know that I'll be here forever, but definitely felt like that initially.
I like that you use the word chapter on Living the Next Chapter podcast. That made me happy. What about people who haven't found their connection with their spot in life? How important is it to really be connected where you live and who you are as a person? Can you kind of unpack the importance of that for us who might be listening going, I don't really feel that connected to where I am in this world?
Sure. I mean, I think there's internal happiness and then there's circumstantial and situational happiness. And if we're not happy where we live, like if we don't like it, like the surroundings, like the weather, all of that, I think that impacts our individual internal happiness and joy level. And so for me, I've always been a person that, if I don't like it, I'll leave. And so, whether it comes to a party or a living situation, and I've had the freedom to be able to do that. But, to some degree, I feel like a lot of us do, thankfully, we have the ability to move. And so for the most part. And so for me, I think it's really important that you are in a place where you or feel like you're supported and you're thriving. I mean, we see that meme all the time. Like if you're not a tree, if you don't like where you are, you can get up and leave, And so it's that sort of, okay, well, you're in charge. We have this agency. And I know people might be thinking, oh yeah, but my family and I have this and my job and I get it. And I get it. And that's where, maybe travel comes in or maybe part-time here, part-time there, And so I think for me, at least, it's been a huge factor in my own personal journey and my own health, because as I mentioned, when I was living on the West Coast, I was very, very deeply affected by seasonal affective disorder. As someone who struggles with anxiety and depression periodically, it was really not a good environment for me because all humans need light. We all need sunlight, and I mean, you're getting sunlight, but you're not getting much. And it's gray and rainy like 8 months of the year. And I mean, that makes it beautiful and lush. And it's not snowy like Ottawa, but it's just dreary, it's dreary. And it's really hard. At least for me, it was really hard for me to feel authentically happy when I was like, oh man, it's raining again. All right. And that sort of energy. So for me, it's been a big factor.
Amazing. And okay, so if you're not feeling that happiness where you are in this world, I love the tree analogy. Again, that's great because we can get up and go anywhere we want. But I guess for people growing up, like to have a bigger worldview beyond where you grew up, your hometown, and the city limits of where you are, and that's all you know about the world. Mm-hmm. Going somewhere different gives you a different perspective as well, and different experiences, and makes you a different person, I guess, in a way as well.
Oh, I agree 100%. I think that's why it's so important for us to travel and be open and experience other cultures and other ways of life. Because if we only ever experience the neighborhood that we grew up in, then it limits what you get to experience, what you get to learn, what you get to try, what you get to see, and I think there's such a merit in going and seeing other parts of the world and seeing the similarities and the overlap and the interesting things that maybe are a little bit different than you do them or that you were raised in, but are similar, by the theme or by the nature, by the thread of it or whatever it is. And just learning like, oh, wow, there's so many ways, there's so many ways to live life. And I think it's like, when you go to a bookstore, there's so many books in there for you to read. But if you only ever go to the self-help section and you only look at books in the self-help section, which is fine. I mean, we all have our genres that we appreciate. But if you look and you like, just, this is so relevant because on the weekend I did my book signing at Barnes and Noble and I walked in the bookstore and I was like, whoa, this place is huge. And there's so many books and there's so many colors and there's like so many things, and as a new author, I was looking at the covers and looking at the way people had done stuff. And so for me, it's just it was a very eye-opening experience. And so I think that's what, to your point, is when we go to new places and we try new things, you get a sense for, oh, wow, I didn't know some people like to do this before breakfast, or this is what happens at the end of the day, or you have a nap in the middle of the day. Really? Okay. And like, it's just really, it's mind expanding and heart opening, which I think is always really important.
Do you think this also lends well to your writing process, that you're in a different space, you learn new things about yourself and about your surroundings? Does that show itself in your writings?
For sure, because it's all been part of my journey. It's been what I've gone through to become the person that I am now. So the stories in the book itself is called The Warrior's Journey. And so it's really about the journey of life that we're all on, and specifically entrepreneurs and the journey of, creating a business for ourselves, carving out a new pathway, owning who we are as an expert, and all of the things that come into business ownership, entrepreneurship, even as an author, right? It's like there's so many different stages to anything. It's all definitely contributed to that. And I think it's always really important to have experiences that challenge us and help us to grow and help us to stretch our comfort zone, because otherwise we tend to get very familiar with that and be reluctant to try things outside of that. But that's really, at least in my opinion, where a lot of the interesting things are and where the growth happens.
Nice. So for the book, again, The Warrior's Journey, tell us a little bit about how this book began and maybe a little behind the scenes story about the writing process for this book. What was exciting for you as an author?
Sure. So I've always loved to write. I mean, the first time I was published was in grade 7, and it was a poem that I had sent in to the Ottawa Citizen, and they published it on the teen page. Much to my chagrin, though, because one of the teachers at the school saw it and she was really proud. And so she read it to her class, and I was teased relentlessly for weeks because of what was in there. And they misinterpreted what I was saying. And so for me, I think it could have been one of those moments where, it was like a fork in the road of like, either you did this and it didn't work, or it was like, whatever. And this is something I've always enjoyed. And as an entrepreneur, I mean, so my business, the main part of my business is I support other entrepreneurs in being holistically healthy so that they can have an impact and attract more abundance. And so as a personal trainer, yoga instructor, all of that, I create a lot of content as part of my social media strategy. So I've written a lot already, and I've, blog posts, So there's a lot of writing. And so at first I was like, oh, well, I don't know if I want to write a book. I spend so much time on my computer as it is. I mean, hello, that's a whole other ball of wax, but it keeps me employed because it's a problem for most entrepreneurs. And so I went to a workshop over a year ago, and the coach said, if you are really serious about growing your brand and becoming an expert and becoming somebody who makes a big impact on the world, one of the things that you need to have is a book. And I was like, well, I'm serious about making an impact, and I definitely think people should have these tools. All right. And I'm a good writer. Why not? And so that was the initial thing. And he said, well, here's the thing, if you're going to use it as a business growth tool as well, because if you're a business owner, it kind of makes sense that they would align, unless you want to write in a totally different genre, then that's totally cool too. He said, if you have something that you have established already that you could write a book about or build upon or take a piece out of, start there, because that'll give you a bit of an advantage because you already have a structure that you can follow, and then it might lead people on that journey into the program, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I sure do. at the beginning of the pandemic is when I brought to life a program that's called Wake the Warrior Within. And Wake the Warrior Within is based on an ancient story that we use in the yoga practice that inspired the warrior poses, that tells a warrior on a journey, carving out a path for himself. He's charged with a mission. The seed is planted in his heart, and he has to make his way to the scene of the battle. And he stands in the center of the battle, or center of the party, and he's owning his personal presence and power. And that's warrior too. So it's how the poses are shown up in the story and vice versa. And so I created this series, and I didn't do anything with it until the beginning of the pandemic. And I was like, oh my goodness, what do I do? And now let me release this story and this series because people needed something to do. And so did I. And so I released Wake the Warrior Within, and I've been playing with it for a few years. But then I went to this book writing workshop, and then I thought, okay, well, why don't I write a book about that? I already have the program. It's already laid out. And I love the story, and I love telling it. And the cool thing is that the story of the warrior, that he goes on the journey, really parallels with the story of most entrepreneurs, of having a mission, having a dream, carving out a path for yourself, really owning who you are, and taking these brave, inspired steps, and learning to go up against the most challenging of all opponents, our own mind. And that's the essence of the yoga practice, is learning to witness our mind and become aware of it and make it a powerful tool. And that's the essence of the warrior's journey. And so that was the inspiration for the book. And so I started writing the book, and I'm sharing some of the qualities that we learn in the yoga practice that we learn through the story that are really impactful and essential for entrepreneurs. Like, first one is bounce back ability or resilience, like our ability to get back up after we have a failed launch, or we have, a troll on social media, or whatever it is. And so I started writing the book. And so, of course, my own inner critic and my own inner negative committee had a lot of things to say about it, and that's the thing, what you were speaking to earlier, of like, our comfort zone is there for a reason, to keep us safe, and our brain wants to keep us in this realm of safety. And so as I'm like creating this book, and it's a big idea, and it's vulnerable to be sharing my stories, and trying to draw this parallel between the warrior and the journey that the entrepreneurs are on, and my brain's like, this isn't making sense, nobody's gonna like this, what are you doing? And I was like, zip it, we're done with this nonsense. I've been listening to you for far too long. And so, yeah, it was interesting because, my goal was to have it done within the year, but, the calendar year ended. But then once the new year came again, I said, let's just, because the thing is, we can have especially with writing a book, you can sort of let it drag on forever. And then I was like, okay, this is not going to happen. I finished it up, and then I released it just a few weeks ago in the middle of June.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that you did a book signing. You're at the bookstore. Did you get to meet some of your readers and interact? That must be exciting.
It was really fun. So that was my second one. So the first one I did was at my friend's cafe. And so a bunch of my friends and family here on Maui came to see it and to get their book. And a lot of them had read the digital version of it already, but that was really lovely to look around the room and have, all of these people that I love so much be holding my book and just looking back at me and beaming with pride for me. And that just was so beautiful. And then because I went with Ingram Spark, which is a printer, and they are connected with Barnes & Noble and a bunch of different large stores, my book is already at Barnes & Noble. And so I know, it just blows my mind. And so on Saturday, I went into Barnes & Noble here on Maui. It's our only bookstore. And they had set up a really beautiful display of my book right up front, local author. And, and so it was so surreal. And then I invited a bunch of my yoga students who hadn't come to the first one. And then there was people that saw it on the social media of Barnes & Noble that had known me from the past and came in. And so it was really cool. And the first woman that bought the book, I had never met before. And she was actually a hairstylist. So she is an entrepreneur. And she said, I want to buy this because you're a local author. And I just, we had a nice chat. So she texted me because my business card was in there a couple hours later and said, I already read the first section, and I have to tell you, I'm so glad that we met because this book is exactly what I needed. So had I listened to the nonsense in my head that said, nobody's going to like this doesn't make sense, blah, 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 then I wouldn't get to support this beautiful woman and all the other hundreds of people that have already read it. So it's like to the point of all the people that are listening that are like, oh, I don't know, is anybody going to read this? The point is that, yeah, maybe you'll sell thousands and hundreds of thousands of books. or maybe you'll sell 5, but like it's really about you giving your voice and your story a chance to be heard, because you never know who needs to hear it.
Right. And it opens doors as well, right? For, I know you do speaking and things like that as well. So having that book is just one more door that could possibly open for you to take you in another path that you might not have anticipated just because you have a book.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
So maybe a yoga class at Barnes and Noble might be a good idea. I don't know, maybe. And then tied into the book. I'm a musician, and I work with a musician, singer-songwriter, and her music's played at Chapters, Indigo.
Cool.
And in downtown Toronto, they invited us to come and do an acoustic set in the store at Indigo. And she's one of the featured musicians that you'd hear in the music when you're shopping in the store. So it was very unique because people coming for books would be like, why is there a concert going on? Right. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of interesting to do something unique and different for those people. So maybe a little yoga class might be interesting at Barnes and Noble. That might be an interesting little thing you could pull together and promote the book and your yoga classes at the same time. So you never know. Lots of opportunities out there.
For sure.
It's great. So take us deeper into the book then. It's designed for entrepreneurs. Did you have a big problem you were looking to solve by writing the book on behalf of entrepreneurs? Was it meant to be more a guide that they can use on an ongoing basis? Give us some of the parameters behind what you thought of your reader as you were writing.
More of a guidebook of the inner transformation, the inner shifts required to see the outer results. Because, we hear a lot about like success is an inside job and you got to become the person you're supposed to be and all of that. But there's not really any clear directive on how to actually do that. Okay. And at least from what I've found. And the thing is that that's really what we're doing when we practice yoga. It's not just practicing to stand on one foot. It's showing yourself you can do challenging things, being able to stay in alignment physically and also keep your mind steady so you're focused on what you're doing, which is, helps you to be more productive. Like all of it fits together. And so for me, it was helping people to see this incredible tool set in a new light, because it's so much more than just flexibility. It's really who we become because of the process and because of the practice. And the same can be said for entrepreneurship. It's like the learning and the personal growth that comes from doing something like this is unbelievable. So it really, for me, it was to help people realize that in order for them to have the impact that they want, to be able to reach the levels in their business that they are destined for, that they set for themselves, goals that they set for themselves, it really does take and requires inner shifts and inner work and showing up for yourself. And it requires your body to be strong and healthy, your mind to be clear and focused, your spirit to be inspired and uplifted and all of that. And so why not have a tool set that does all of that simultaneously, that then helps you to propel yourself forward towards your goal and to your vision? And so really that's, from my perspective, at least, and from my students and clients, that's what the practice helps you to experience. And so I wanted to give people a sense for the deeper work that it is initiating for people, whether you are aware of it or not. That's really what's happening when you stand on one foot and you do your warrior pose, and so, but I know that in my community and in yours too, because many readers read because they like to learn. We like to know why. We like to go deeper. We like to understand it viscerally. And so that's really what I gave people inside the book, because inside the book, there's breathing practices, there's embodiment tools, there's journaling questions, there's an opportunity to, jump in and do a little free yoga session with me, because along the way, there's ways for people to experience that just as a free gift of, grabbing the book. So there's 2 different yoga practices in there that you can jump into and sign up for and just do right away. And so it really, for me, it's a guidebook, it's a compass, it's a tool set, rather than just you read it once and that was great, move forward. It really, it's a practice. It's a book, but it's a practice.
So we kind of talked about not being a tree and that you can move anywhere in life and you have no boundaries, borders to where we can be. And some people, I think, maybe their starting line sometimes becomes their finish line because they really don't go anywhere in life. They just kind of, they do life and that's it. Life kind of happens to them. They never really get connected with where they are, like we talked about earlier. But I'm wondering if you see a correspondence between a new entrepreneur who is first time an entrepreneur, learning how to do what they're doing, and a first time yoga student coming to a class. Do you see like a parallel between the two? And the fact that when you come to your first time to a yoga class, I can probably appreciate it's going to be clumsy, awkward. You don't know what's going on. You don't know how to do any of them of the poses. You're like, I've no. You're looking around, going, "Am I doing it right?"
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel like entrepreneurs feel like that as well. Talk about that relationship and kind of the growth that happens over time as you just dive in, get connected with your classes, with your instructor, and see growth happen in yoga and in entrepreneur life. Talk a little bit about that relationship between the two.
That's it. That's the parallel that I was drawing throughout the whole book, is that when we start anything, and especially for people that like to do well, that like to, succeed and thrive and get things right the first time, it's challenging, because that's what happens. A lot of time people go to yoga and they're like, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And I can't hold still. And I don't like this because it's too slow and all of this, but yet it's challenging you in different ways. Right. And so entrepreneurship is the same. It really just, it gives you the opportunity to go out there, and it's rather vulnerable. It's like, as vulnerable it is to go to a class and you're wearing your yoga pants and it looks like everybody else knows what they're doing, to go onto social media and start your Instagram following, and you go on Instagram and people have hundreds of thousands of millions of followers and you're like, I have 10, so it's really, it's an interesting parallel, because as with anything, there's always that growth period. And that's one of the tools that we talk about in the book is commitment. Because like when you stand on one foot, you got to commit to standing on the foot, and you're going to wiggle and wobble and sway all over the place like a tree in a windstorm. And the same is true for entrepreneurs. It's like, why are you doing what you're doing? Why is this important to you? Because there's going to be times where you sway all over the place and you get tested and it's hard and you fail and you fall over. And it's really about continually showing up and continually learning and growing. It's like continually going to the mat. All right, I'm going to try the pose again. Might be a little different this day, but every time you try it again, every time you go to write another email as an entrepreneur, every time you've learned and you've grown and you're not the same person, right? And so it's this opportunity for us to witness ourselves, whether it's through the lens of what's happening on a yoga mat or the lens of growing a business. So it's really, the parallel to me is pretty interestingly similar.
I like that. Because as you're talking, I'm thinking, wow. And there's going to be times as an entrepreneur where people just don't get you. They don't get what you do. They don't understand your motivation. They don't understand what you're trying to say, what you're trying to do. Back to grade 7, right? Reading your poem in front of the class. Yeah. It's like, no, that's not what I meant. That's not, no, it's supposed to be this, not that. But people will take your best efforts and your biggest failures, and they will put their own spin on it. So they want to kind of put you in a box and kind of say, this is who you are. But by putting yourself out there, whether you're writing a book, creating a business, jumping on a yoga mat, you're going to have some really big lessons to learn in a short amount of time. And I just kind of feel that as an author, many authors seem to get stalled on the mat, where they're in the room, they're observing everyone else's success, and they don't know how they fit in. So as a new author, what would you say to other authors that are listening, that are staring at that blank page going, I know it's in me, but I don't know how to get this out into the world. I'm afraid of being judged, misunderstood. What are your thoughts for a new author?
I understand completely. And the most critical voices, for the most part, are internal. We set high standards for ourselves. And so there's also fear of like, I don't want this to be judged. And I was telling my friend the other day of, this is the first time that I put something out that's so vulnerable that I can't take back, because I'm very present on social media and I've been doing this for a while. So there's a lot of my content. There's a lot of me out there. But even when it's something that's really raw and close to my heart, you can always delete it. But when it's out in the world, it's kind of that double-edged sword of, you're going to have a lasting impact with what you do if you sell 100 books or 100 million books, and so the cool thing about it is that it really is an opportunity for you to witness yourself. And the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. And so if you're sitting there and you're like, how do I get started? Then maybe just look at like, are there a lot of ways in my life where I'm just kind of not doing something that I want to do? Because it might be something to look at. Because the thing is that when you get started, as we've been speaking to, it's going to be such an incredible growth process for you to witness yourself in the journey of it, and seeing it from beginning to end. And it's something crazy, like only 2% of all people that start a book actually publish it, and so it's like,
Wow.
it's pretty significantly small number. And so to really just honor the fact that, yeah, maybe you're going to publish it, but maybe it's just about you following through because you said you wanted to do this, and the block is usually internal. Maybe you don't have time, but maybe there's, you can just dedicate like 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a week, whatever it is having that commitment to yourself, because clearly there's something inside of you that's asking you to do this and calling you to do this. And so ask you, like, just see whatever you do to get quiet. Maybe it's yoga or gardening or whatever. And just go into that space where you feel connected, where you feel like, still, and connect to your heart, connect to your inner guidance of like, what's a good next step for me? Like, how should I map this out? Or because if we get too in our head, and that's where we get stalled, we get too in our head and we get into that inner critic and all that stuff. That's when we really get in our own way and we stay in our own way. And so I would just keep going back to what this is going to be, just as an experiment, because we get all in our head about it. We make it all serious and like, yeah, maybe you'll have a bestseller, maybe not. It's just a matter of like, bring it out into the world, because there's clearly a story that is asking to be told through you.
Nice. I love that. Is there, when you're writing the book, do you get to a point where in the book you're writing and you're thinking, I really don't want to include this part because I haven't lived it completely yet, or it's something I'm still working on in my own personal journey, and if I put this in there, I'm going to be accountable for people. They're going to think that either I've accomplished this thing in my life, or it's not been a big deal for me, but it really has been a big deal. And it's this thing that you're like, if I don't put it in, I don't have to talk about it. but I think it's important to my book and important to my story. Is there anything that you're kind of wrestling with within your own book that you're finding hard to put into place for yourself?
I don't teach anything that I haven't gained a significant skill set in,
Okay.
because
Good.
I think that's a bit ahead of myself. I think it's, for me, integrity is very important. So I only included things that I feel really solid about, because I don't feel good about teaching something that I haven't completely understood at a deep level. And so there's nothing in the book that I really debated. Like, I mean, there's a story, there's a blessing at the beginning that, I thought, oh, I don't know if people are going to get this, but people loved it so much. There's a story in there that I didn't go all the way into the details of, because I don't know how everybody feels about past lives or reincarnation or all of that. And so I told a little bit of the story, but I didn't tell the whole story, because that's my private information. And so it's one of these things of like, you get to tell your version of the story. And so you get to decide what you're going to share, and it was kind of fun, because then at the book signing with my friends, then I told them the rest of the story.
Oh, nice.
Because, it's like, I want people to know, but I don't want it to be judged on face value, because some people aren't ready for that, and so, that was the only thing that I really kind of debated about, but I decided to put it in.
Okay. Nice. And I guess the other part too is, like in music, I'm a musician and we write songs, we write lyrics, and it's about a certain thing in our mind. But then somebody walks up to us later on in life and they're like, I love your song because it meant this to me. And we're like, well, it was more about this. It wasn't about what you're talking about. But they get a different interpretation of your music and what you've written, and they go on a different path beyond what you had even thought of as an author, as a musician, back to your story about being in public school. And they took your your poem out of context and what you'd originally written. People will take our words and our music and our content and go with it and take it places we never thought to go to. So we have to be a little bit flexible, I guess, in that. This is because people will interpret things through their lens, through their view of life. And we got to celebrate that. In some cases, we really need to be open to that and allow people to take our content beyond its original intended purpose, right? Have you kind of felt that as well?
Oh, 100%. And I think it kind of full circles back to what you're talking about, travel and taking, open-minded perspective on things. And just because it meant one thing to me doesn't mean that that's the be all and the end all, and it's been interesting for me to have people's reflections on things and hear what landed for them the most, and what their takeaway was. And so, yeah, it's interesting because I think things are always open to interpretation, right? And so even though, I thought it was this, that, or the other thing, a lot of people felt the same way, but it was really beautiful to just hear how it landed for them or what it inspired for them. And so, yeah, it was a really cool experience for that reason too.
Nice. So before we go, I have one more question at the end I want to ask you. But before I do that, as far as connecting with you, Megan, and getting more information about the book, and being part of your world, where do we go? Where are you most active? Where would you like to send everybody?
Well, I would love to invite you to grab the book. So you can go to thewarriorsjourneybook.com. So thewarriorsjourneybook.com. And that way we can get connected because you'll get the link to get the book, but then also some really great bonuses. So a meditation infused with the magic of Maui, and then also an outdoor yoga practice that will take you on a journey into the story of the warrior through the poses and the practice. So that's some gifts when you go over there, thewarriorsjourneybook.com. And then I'm most active on Instagram. And so on Instagram, it is I am Megan Nolan.
Nice. Okay. For people new to yoga, they're thinking about it. I know we live in wine country here in Ontario, and we'll have like goat yoga. And it's like, wow. So people are doing all their yoga class and there's little goats hopping around while you're doing your yoga. I've seen puppy yoga with dogs, and there's all these different flavors of yoga, I guess, but the main heart of learning yoga and being part of this community. What is it for someone who's interested? Where should we begin with this? What is your expert advice for someone listening who has never done it, super nervous, but is curious to see the results that could happen for them in their life? Where would we start? What would you suggest?
I would suggest grabbing the book, and then inside the book, there's options for you to check out little things, and it'll take you into a series that will take you on a journey through the practice and really give you the fundamentals. So that would be a great place to start. Other than that, I would suggest if you would prefer to go to a class, because traditionally yoga was taught one-on-one, because we're all so different, because we're all so unique in the way we move our body and our posture and our pain and our patterns and all of that stuff. And so if you feel more comfortable, especially at the beginning when you're just first learning, it's really nice to go to a class, specifically a beginner's class. And what you really want to do is get the fundamentals, because you want to do it well, right? Regardless of whether or not you're a hyperachiever, I want you to do it well. I want you to do it safely, right? We're not going to be perfect on the first day, but being open to learning as you go. And so going to a beginner's class with a smaller group, because sometimes the big groups, you get lost and you're not doing it correctly. And if they're not seeing you do it, then you're not learning, your hand goes here and this hand does that and da, 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 da. So I think that either of those places would be a really good place to start. If you want to learn on your own with the self-paced series, then connecting through me, or if you can find a class locally where you can go into a yoga studio, because it's also nice too to have somebody have their eyes on you to be able to offer you little suggestions. Because the cool thing about yoga is there's many cool things, but one of the cool things is the subtlety of it. Because sometimes when you do just the littlest thing with your foot, everything goes and you light it all up and you're like, oh, whoa, okay, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. That's what it's supposed to feel like. And it's just those little tiny refinements that really make a difference. So yeah, either of those would be a great start.
Great. And a nice parallel for for people listening in life too. There's just little things that you do can make a world of difference. So write a book. There's a good start right there. Megan, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
And congratulations on the book and all the book signings and meeting your community. And there's many great things ahead for you. And I hope this isn't the end of your writing career, that many, many more things are coming.
Well, yes. So there's 21 qualities. I was all gung-ho. I was going to put 21 in the first book, and then that was taking too long. And so I decided to go with 3 books, 7 stories in each one. So definitely 2 more.
Okay. Well, we'll keep the door open. Please come back. I'd love to have you back and talk about those in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I love that.
Thanks for your time. It's really great to meet you.
You too.
Jumping here at the very end, I want to thank you for coming. We have listeners around the world, and I got to tell you, as a podcaster, it is so great to hear back from the people who listen to the show. Now, you are still here. The podcast's over. Like, we're sweeping up and putting the chairs away. You're still here. So, hi. I would love to talk to you. No, I really, really would. I would love to hear your voice. I would love to hear from you through email. You can do all that at livingthenextchapter.com. I say it fast because I love it. Living the Next Chapter. It's the name of the podcast. .com. How's that for easy? Right? Right. So come on over there and let's have a conversation. You can set up time in my calendar. You can, air quote here, book time in my calendar, book next chapter. Let's have a conversation. Thanks for being here. See you on the next one. Cheers.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.